The universe was silent, wide, and endless. Stars burned softly in the distance, planets spun without sound, and space carried secrets that no one cared to hear. But in that deep and lonely darkness, a small voice traveled slowly across the galaxies. It was not a military message, nor a call for war. It was not science or politics. It was something much more fragile, something almost painful. It was a plea. A thin signal, shaking and broken, drifted across star systems like a lost child searching for a home. Most advanced civilizations scanned past it without a second thought. Some species laughed at how weak the transmission was. Others deleted it from their receivers as background noise. In a universe full of power and technology, no one cared about a whisper asking for help. But the signal kept traveling, kept fighting, kept hopping, and it carried only 3 simple, heartbreaking words. Please hire us. Across hundreds of planets, the message repeated again and again in many alien voices. Some sounded old and tired, some young and afraid, some metallic, some soft and trembling. But all shared the same emotion, desperation. They were workers, engineers, farmers, builders, healers, all abandoned by the powerful empires who once used them. Machines had replaced them, and corporations had thrown them aside like broken tools. They had nothing left. No jobs, no purpose, no future. So they sent the message into the dark, praying that someone, anyone, would listen. For years, the signal floated through empty space. Planets ignored it. Empires mocked it. Computers marked it as useless. But one night on a small blue planet called Earth, a human named Cole sat alone in his little apartment, staring at the sky. He was surrounded by unpaid bills, rejected job applications, and a loneliness that felt heavier than gravity. Had once loved repairing satellites, but his company had replaced him with automated drones. Now he felt the same as the aliens sending that message, forgotten and useless. His apartment was quiet. A single lamp glowed weakly beside him. The world outside slept under the cold moon. Adjusted the dials of his old radio telescope, a hobby he kept only because it made him feel less alone. He scanned random frequencies, expecting nothing but static. Then he heard it. A faint, trembling whisper. A signal so soft it almost didn't exist. Leaned forward, heart suddenly pounding. He turned the dial again. The whisper grew clearer. A sad chorus of voices spilled into the room as if carried by tears. Please hire us. Froze, he stared at the speakers like they were ghosts. He replayed it again, and again. Each time the same words echoed, spoken with pain that reached straight into his chest. Who were they? Why were they begging? Why did their voices sound like the universe itself was crying? Swallowed hard, he was not rich, he was not powerful, he was just a jobless human sitting in a dark room. But something inside him, something human, refused to stay silent. He pressed the small microphone attached to his radio system. His voice shook as he spoke into the void. Hello, can you hear me? For several seconds he heard nothing except static, felt foolish. Maybe the signal was old. Maybe the senders were long gone. Maybe he was talking to a ghost of the past. Then suddenly, a soft voice replied, Human, we hear you. Sat back in shock, his breath caught in his throat. The voice continued, weak but hopeful. Please tell us, do you have work? Do you need help? Please, we can build, repair, grow, create, anything. We only ask for a task, a purpose, something to prove we still matter. Felt his eyes burn. He understood that feeling too well. He knew what it meant to want to be needed. He whispered, I don't have much. I don't even have a job myself, but I can try. There was silence. Then the alien voice replied, filled with emotion. We don't need money. We only need meaning. And in that moment, 2 lonely worlds, one human, countless alien, connected through shared pain, shared hope, and a simple desire to feel useful again. The forgotten workers had finally found someone who listened. And Cole realized something he never expected. In the vast, cold universe, he was their first answer. The reply came slowly, carried across the void, but it was unlike anything had ever imagined. It was not one voice. It was thousands. Thousands of voices, trembling and broken, filling his small apartment with the sound of hope and fear mixed together. The message was clear. They were workers who had been abandoned, left to drift in space, their skills and lives considered worthless. They called themselves the Forgotten Workers, though each one was from a different world, a different species, a different life. Some had 4 arms, some had scales or feathers, some were thin as reeds, others were round and soft. But they shared the same pain. Their worlds had been taken over by enormous corporations. Machines had replaced their hands. Artificial intelligences had replaced their minds. Their families had gone, their cities abandoned, and their talents thrown away like broken tools. One of them spoke directly too. His voice was soft, almost trembling, yet carried weight. He said. I come from a world called, we were engineers, builders, farmers. We worked because it mattered, because our hands and minds could change the world. But the corporations, they said we were inefficient. They replaced us with machines. Now we have nothing. Please, human, will you give us something to do? Something to matter for? Felt his chest tighten. He knew what it meant to feel ignored, to be replaced, to feel invisible. He had felt it when his job was taken. He had felt it when people stopped asking him to help, when he walked down streets and past strangers who didn't see him at all. And now, across the stars, he was hearing a pain far greater than his own, a pain that could have been almost unbearable if not for the honesty in the voices. He swallowed hard. His hands shook as he reached for the microphone. I don't have money, he said. I don't have a business. I don't even have a job myself. What could I offer you? His voice was patient. Human, we do not need money. We do not need credits or wages. We need purpose. We need work. Something to prove that we are not useless, that we can still make the world better, even a small part of it. Leaned back in his chair. He could feel the weight of all those lives across the universe pressing down on him. But he also felt something else, a spark. The smallest flame of excitement, of meaning, of connection. He realized that he could do something. He could give them a chance. And if he tried, maybe he could fix a little corner of the galaxy with them. Okay, he whispered. I can try. I have an old weather satellite. It's broken. Maybe you can help me repair it. The voices erupted into quiet, shaking joy. Shouts, cheers, cries of relief and happiness intertwined with a faint humming of alien music. They were not celebrating money or power or weapons. They were celebrating the simple truth that someone had finally listened. That someone finally believed they still mattered. Spoke again, softer now, almost like a whisper in his mind. Human, we will fix it. And when we do, we will show you what it is like to matter again. We will show you pride. Stared at his old, worn tools and the small satellite he had tinkered with for years. It seemed fragile, almost laughable compared to the vastness of space. But to these workers, it was a mission. To them, it was a chance to be alive again. He realized then that this was bigger than himself, bigger than Earth, bigger than any problem he had faced. These beings had no hope, no guidance, no leader, no hand to hold. He might be small and weak and ordinary, but he could give them a spark, a direction, and sometimes that was enough. Days passed as they worked, sent instructions, schematics, even small sketches drawn in his tiny notebook. And every night he listened to their voices as they collaborated, shared ideas, argued, solved problems, and celebrated victories. He realized he had never heard such determination, such dedication, such love for a task. They worked not for money, not for fame, not for survival. They worked because they could finally feel alive again. And sitting alone in his small apartment, realized something incredible. Across the endless darkness of space, in a galaxy that had forgotten them, a chorus of alien voices had found their human, and he had found them. For the first time in a long time, smiled without hesitation. For the first time, he felt like he mattered too. And somewhere in the quiet stars, the forgotten workers waited, ready to prove that even those abandoned by the universe could shine brightly if someone simply gave them a chance, stared at the old satellite floating silently above Earth. It had been dead for years, abandoned in its lonely orbit. No one had tried to repair it. Engineers had declared it useless. Governments had moved on. It was just space junk now. But for the voices across the stars, it was more than that. It was a chance, a first step for the forgotten workers to prove that they still mattered. He connected the satellite's data feed to his small system and sent it to and the others. The moment he pressed send, the chorus of alien voices filled his room. It was a mix of excitement and nervousness, of hope and fear. They had never worked for a human before. Some of them had never left there. Some had only built machines under the strict rules of corporations. But now they were free to create, to think, to solve a problem as their own. Voice led the team. "We will start immediately," he said. "Do not worry, human, we will fix it, we will make it work again." Watched as lines of code, engineering diagrams, and instructions flowed through his terminal. He could barely understand half of it, but he could feel their dedication. Every alien worked in perfect rhythm with the others, despite the distance of thousands of light years. Some sent designs for solar panels. Others worked on the satellite's internal circuits. A few suggested tiny, unexpected improvements that made his heart race. They were not just repairing it, they were creating something better than before. Days turned into nights, but barely noticed. He slept in short bursts, drank bitter coffee, and stared at the screens. He watched as the forgotten workers argued, encouraged each other, laughed quietly at mistakes, and celebrated small victories. It was the first time he had seen anyone work with such pure passion. They weren't competing for money or credit. They were competing with nothing but their own limits, and they refused to lose. Then came the moment. A soft alarm beeped and the satellite stirred. Lights blinked inside the control panels. Systems hummed back to life. Froze. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst. Slowly, the satellite rotated into the correct orbit. Its solar panels opened, glinting in the sun. The small instruments that had been dead for years began transmitting data again. Whispered, almost unable to speak, "You did it." Across the stars, the voices cheered. They didn't just cheer for success, they cheered for life, for the chance to matter again. His voice was full of pride. "Human, it is done. Look at it. We are not useless. We can still create. We can still build. We can still care." His eyes filled with tears. He had never expected this. He had never imagined that beings from another galaxy, who had been abandoned and left hopeless, could achieve something so incredible. And yet here it was, a lifeless satellite, alive again because they believed in themselves and because someone, just one human, had listened. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "Good job, everyone, you did it." The celebration across the galaxy was quiet but full of warmth. For many of the forgotten workers, it was the first time they had felt pride in centuries. Some whispered to each other in their native languages. Some simply wept quietly at the miracle. They had waited so long to matter, and finally, someone had given them that chance. Realize something else. This was only the beginning. The satellite was a small task, a simple job, but it had changed something fundamental. He could give them purpose, and in return, they gave him hope, energy, and a connection he had never felt before. He was no longer a lonely, jobless human in a tiny apartment. He was part of something bigger. He was part of a family that spanned the stars. Spoke again, gently. "Human, we will work for you again. Send us another task, and we will give it our hearts. We need nothing but a purpose, and you have given it to us." Nodded, smiling despite the tears on his cheeks. I will," he said. "I'll find something else, something important, something that matters." And somewhere in the silent black of space, the satellite glowed softly, a tiny beacon of hope. It wasn't just a machine, it was proof. Proof that the forgotten workers were not forgotten. Proof that even abandoned, unseen beings could still shine brightly when given a chance. That night sat back in his chair, exhausted but happy. Across the universe, the voices of the forgotten workers sang quietly, a chorus of life, joy, and pride. And for the first time in decades, felt that he had done something truly meaningful. Somewhere between Earth and the stars, hope had begun to bloom. And nothing, not time, not distance, not apathy, could stop it now. After the satellite was repaired, something extraordinary began to happen. Across the galaxy, news of the forgotten workers' success spread like wildfire. They were no longer nameless, abandoned beings. They had a purpose now, and the universe was starting to notice. Small planets that had ignored them for centuries sent messages of curiosity. Scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens asked if the workers could help them too. The galaxy was slowly waking up to a truth it had forgotten. Skill and heart could never truly be replaced by machines. His tiny apartment became a hub for interstellar communication. Screens flickered with alien faces and alien languages, all united by one message. "We want to work. Please give us a task." He smiled as he answered each message, sometimes staying up through the night, sometimes drinking more coffee than was wise, but never once feeling tired in the way he had before. This work gave him life. The voices of the forgotten workers gave him a sense of purpose he had long believed lost. Became his primary contact, guiding teams of workers across multiple planets. Sent simple instructions for small tasks, and the aliens went beyond what he imagined. They repaired old research probes, rebuilt telescopes, and fixed weather monitoring stations abandoned by humans long ago. Each success brought pride, not just to the workers, but to as well. Every job completed, every machine restored, every project revived became proof that life was never meaningless if someone cared enough to believe. "What is this?" asked one night as he watched dozens of alien workers repair a planetary water purification system. "Why do you care so much about things that seem small?" His voice carried warmth, almost a laugh. "Human, nothing is small when it matters to someone. To us, every repair, every task, every chance to do something again, it is proof that we still exist, that we are still alive, that we can matter." Nodded slowly, understanding more than words could express. He realized that the forgotten workers were not just helping machines or technology. They were helping themselves. Every task completed was a victory over despair. Every repair was a battle against abandonment. Every small success was a spark that kept hope alive. As weeks passed, the number of workers increased. Beings from distant systems, previously considered useless or obsolete, joined the guild. Engineers who had been replaced by automated factories, artists whose paintings were considered irrelevant, farmers whose lands had been taken, all came together under one simple idea. Someone believed in us, and now we will believe in ourselves. Created a network he called the First Galactic Job Board. It was simple, just a collection of tasks and requests, a place where anyone who needed work could find it, and anyone who could help could volunteer. He did not charge money. He did not ask for credit. He only provided a bridge between those who needed purpose and those who needed work. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Soon, entire planets were asking for the forgotten workers' help. Cities were rebuilt. Farms were revived. Research stations began transmitting new knowledge. Technology that had been abandoned for centuries came alive again. And all the while, the workers sang quietly in their own ways, sharing small stories, small jokes, small laughter across the void. Sometimes wondered how beings from so many worlds with so many differences could be so perfectly united. But he realized the answer was simple. Purpose unites more strongly than blood or language ever could. One evening, as stared at the screens, he whispered to, "Do you think we are changing the galaxy?" His voice was gentle but firm. "Human, you have done more than anyone else could. You gave us purpose. We gave life again to the forgotten. And together we are changing the galaxy, one task at a time." Leaned back in his chair, exhausted but happier than he had ever been. For the first time in his life, he did not feel small. He did not feel invisible. Across the endless blackness of space, he could see hope shining brighter than any star. The satellite had been the first spark. The repairs, the small tasks, the revived cities, they were the flames now. And knew deep in his heart that as long as the forgotten workers had purpose, as long as he kept answering their calls, the fire of hope would never die. Somewhere out there in the endless stars, beings who had been abandoned, ignored, and forgotten were finally standing tall. And for the first time in the history of the galaxy, being chosen to work meant being chosen to live. The galaxy had started to notice the forgotten workers. Planets that once ignored them now sought their help. Machines and systems thought useless were repaired. Cities thought abandoned were rebuilt. And across it all, Cole, a single human in a small apartment, had become the center of a quiet revolution. But not everyone was happy. The megacorporations that had replaced the workers with machines were furious. They had lost control over the abandoned workforce. Their perfect, automated systems suddenly looked cheap, lifeless, and hollow next to the passion of beings who truly cared. And worse, people across multiple worlds had begun to trust the workers more than the corporations. That was something they could not tolerate. So they began to strike. At first, it was subtle. Systems were hacked. Communications were jammed. Rumors spread through the galaxy, painting as a fraud and the workers as dangerous anomalies. But the humans and aliens who relied on the guild ignored the lies. They trusted their own eyes, their own experience, their own hearts. Then the corporations escalated. A fleet of powerful ships, armed with weapons designed to destroy even the largest stations, set course for the central hub of the guild. The star relay where communication, coordination, and hope flowed across hundreds of systems. If the fleet succeeded, every connection would be cut, and the forgotten workers would scatter again. Received the warning too late. His screens lit up with alerts: incoming fleet detected, weapons primed, transmission lines vulnerable. Panic prickled his spine, his hands shook. He whispered to, voice trembling, "They're going to destroy everything, all of you, I can't stop them." Was quiet for a moment. Then, in a voice calm and full of conviction, he said, "Human, we will not run, we will not hide. We have waited for centuries to be useful. This is our chance to prove it. Trust us." Stared at the screen. He had never seen courage like that. He wanted to cry, to beg them to escape, to take the safe path, but he knew he couldn't. The forgotten workers were not afraid of losing their lives. They were afraid of never being chosen again, of slipping back into the emptiness they had known for so long. Across the network, instructions flashed rapidly. Workers from thousands of worlds coordinated defenses. Miners reinforced satellites and space stations with asteroids. Engineers rewired ancient reactors to provide shields and energy to their fleet. Scientists repurposed communication arrays to broadcast warnings across light years. Farmers and cargo pilots volunteered to guide and protect evacuation routes. Even artists and storytellers contributed, sending signals of truth across every frequency to show the corporations that the workers were not weak or irrelevant. The fleet arrived expecting an easy victory. They expected to find scattered, confused, and defenseless laborers. But instead, they were met with unity, precision, and determination. Each ship was countered. Each system defended. Each attempt to destroy the network met resistance from beings who refused to be invisible. Watched from his small station as the battle unfolded across screens. Fear had been replaced by awe. The workers moved with perfect coordination, each using their unique skills. Some ships rammed incoming attackers with precision, others disabled weapons with clever tricks, and still others protected critical points with clever engineering that no machine could have planned. His voice came through, calm but firm. "Human, we are not just defending systems, we are defending our right to matter. Every one of us has waited too long. This is our moment to shine." Felt tears burn his eyes. He had never realized how strong beings could be when they believed in themselves. They were not soldiers, they were not warriors. They were simply workers, creators, and dreamers, but together they were unstoppable. Hours passed. The corporation's fleet began to retreat. Their weapons failed, their ships were damaged, their pride shattered. And in the silence that followed, the network of the forgotten workers remained intact. Every connection was still alive, every task still in progress, every voice across the galaxy still sang with hope. Exhaled, exhausted and trembling, he whispered, "You did it, you really did it." Answered softly, "Human, we did what we were always meant to do. You gave us purpose. We gave life back to ourselves. Together, we are unstoppable." That night, the stars shone a little brighter. Across hundreds of worlds, alien workers celebrated quietly, their hearts full of pride. For the first time, they had not only been heard, they had been seen. They had not only been chosen, they had chosen themselves. And sitting in his tiny apartment on a small blue planet, finally understood what it truly meant to matter. The corporations had expected the forgotten workers to run. They had expected chaos, fear, and confusion. They believed that abandoned, replaced, and forgotten beings could never organize against such a mighty force. But they were wrong. For centuries, these beings had waited. They had watched as their lives were stolen, their homes taken, and their skills declared useless. They had suffered silently, swallowed pride, and endured despair. And now, for the first time, they had someone who believed in them, Cole. That belief ignited a fire they had almost forgotten existed. Across thousands of star systems, the forgotten workers prepared. They fortified stations, rewired ancient technology, and synchronized their ships. Every worker, no matter their shape, size, or origin, had a role. Miners became engineers of defense. Scientists became strategists. Farmers became pilots and guides. Artists, storytellers, and philosophers broadcasted messages to inspire their comrades, reminding every worker that they were not alone. Moved quickly among the teams, coordinating repairs, issuing orders, and calming fears. "Human," he whispered across the communication line, "we have waited a long time for this. We will not fail, not now, not ever." Sat at his console, trembling but proud. He had seen the despair in their voices, the emptiness in their hearts, and now he saw strength he could never have imagined. They were not fighting for money. They were not fighting for power. They were fighting for dignity, for the right to exist, for the chance to be chosen again. The corporate fleet arrived, massive and menacing, expecting to strike terror. They fired weapons, launched missiles, and attacked with precision. But the workers were ready. Their coordination was flawless. Asteroids were repurposed as shields. Satellites were moved into defensive positions. Reactors provided energy for emergency shields. Every ship, every station, every worker knew their role and executed it with precision. At first, the corporations laughed. They expected chaos, expected disorder, expected failure. But their laughter faded quickly. Ships were disabled with clever maneuvers. Weapons failed against improvised shields. Missiles were intercepted by machines the workers had repaired and enhanced. And slowly, the corporations realized that they were not facing abandoned laborers. They were facing a united, determined force that refused to be invisible. Watched heart-pounding as beings who had been forgotten for centuries stood tall and proud. His voice came through again, calm and strong. "Human, look at them. They are not weak. They are not powerless. They are alive, and they are ours." Hours passed. The fleet tried to break the defenses, but the workers were unstoppable. Every time a ship threatened a station, a worker found a way to counter it. Every attack was met with ingenuity and courage. Every attempt to destroy the network failed. Finally, the corporate fleet began to retreat. Ships limped away, weapons damaged, pride shattered. Their plans to crush the forgotten workers had failed. They had underestimated the strength of beings who had been cast aside and ignored. They had underestimated the power of hope. Across the galaxy, the workers cheered quietly but with deep satisfaction. They had not only defended their homes, had defended their right to matter. They had shown the universe that even the abandoned could be strong, even the forgotten could fight, and even the unseen could be victorious. Exhaled, exhausted but overwhelmed with pride. He had never imagined he could witness such courage. He whispered, "You did it, all of you." His voice was soft, almost tender. "Human, you gave us the first chance. You believed in us when no one else would. We stood because of you. And now we will never forget what it means to be chosen." For the first time in centuries, the forgotten workers felt alive. They had taken their pain, their despair, their years of waiting, and transformed it into victory. They were no longer the abandoned. They were the unchosen who had chosen themselves, and they had chosen to protect what was precious. That night, across countless worlds, alien workers whispered quietly to one another. They shared smiles, laughter, and tears. They celebrated not just the victory, but the truth they had discovered. That being chosen mattered, that hope mattered, and that one human who had listened and cared could change the destiny of billions. Leaned back, exhausted, his eyes burning with emotion. He realized in a way he had never felt before what it truly meant to matter. He had not led them with weapons or commands. He had not promised wealth or glory. He had done something far more important. He had listened and he had believed. And across the endless stars, the unchosen stood tall. The galaxy had seen their strength, their courage, and their value, and from that day forward, no one would ever call them useless again.